A long, long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away, there was a planet called Terra-Humanium, where a global civil war had just been waged. You see, this was still an uncivilized planet, one that hadn't yet achieved the crucial state of planetary unification, and it was completely unconnected to the rest of the universe. In fact, those backward fools didn't even have any capacity at spacefaring yet. So, this planetary civil war had two sides, the Axis powers and the Allied powers. You'd expect, as in most planets, that the Allies would now consolidate a world government, but you'd be wrong. Two factions once again divided the planet between themselves. In the West, the democratic and capitalist Atlantica, not unlike the corrupt Galactic Republic that existed before Emperor Palpatine. Opposing them, the autocratic and communist Red Star Collective Union, though their idea of communism was barely communal and came closer to the enslavement of an entire society to the state. As these two powers began their competition for power, little did they know something far, far greater was brewing on the galactic side. You see, around the same time, a crisis had been taking place on the planet of Naboo. Of course, you all know the story I'm about to tell. A minor squabble between the Trade Federation and the minor planet swiftly escalated into something far greater. You see, this was during the era of Jedi hegemony over Republican politics, and they would unjustly destroy the Trade Federation's blockading force. Shortly afterwards, the Trade Federation joined Count Dooku in launching a galactic civil war between the Separatists and the Republic. Of course, Terra-Humanium was completely unaware of the occurrence. Their star system was a very poor one, so poor that even the Hutts hadn't bothered spreading their interests there. Only the planet of Jupiter, which was rich in Tabana gas, the product necessary for creating blaster weapons, had a minor Trade Federation outpost on it. From this outpost, the Separatists would eventually grow an interest in Terra-Humanium. Count Dooku himself took a personal interest in the planet. After all, it was unheard of for a human-dominated planet to be so unconnected to the wider galaxy. Scientists, even today, are unsure of how Terra-Humanium could have reached this state. The most common explanation states that a failed colonization pod crashed on the planet, losing communications with the wider galaxy. From there, they were forced to rebuild society basically from scratch. As the galaxy forgot about Terra-Humanium, Terra-Humanium too forgot about the galaxy. But back to our story. Dooku had found the world divided, and he barely had to struggle with which camp to choose. He saw in Atlantica the same decadence that led him to revolt against the Galactic Republic, and he very much respected the Red Star Collective, considering them the stronger power militarily, and therefore the more useful puppet regime on the planet. A delegation was soon sent, and a treaty was signed. The Red Star Collective had, unbeknownst to themselves, joined the Separatists in the Galactic Civil War. But of course, little of this was known to the rest of the planet. The Atlantica, beside minor, easily ignored reports, was none the wiser to the developments in their arch-rival. But across the next solar year, sightings of comets, falling stars, and UFOs became far, far more common, foreboding what was to come. You see, the Separatists were supplying the Red Star Collective secretly with military and civilian hardware, far superior to anything found on Terra-Humanium, and the first place this was tested was in a small jungle region in the south. In a shock to Atlantica, forces aligned to the Red Star Collective suddenly overran their positions with weapons unlike any seen on Terra before, as the planet was still stuck using base metals for bullets rather than energy weapons. Even worse, small deflectors were utilized, leaving most of Atlantica's conventional weapons powerless as the First Nation fell to the Reds. Soon, this same invasion was repeated in the rest of the region, as the Red Star Collective consolidated their rule over most of the world island. But things were about to get even worse. Atlantica had spotted new threats. During an internal rebellion in a Red Star ally, their latest toy was revealed. They would be classified as autonomous, weaponized automatons, but we generally just call them droids. Of course, the Separatists had only sent a couple of outdated, barely functional droids, and in a rather limited amount, but their psychological effect on Atlantica was immense. As a conventional war now seemed unwinnable, the Reds pressed their advantage. In several meetings, Atlantica would begin to appease their rival, acknowledging their control over much of the world islands, as the few independent states that remained were gradually absorbed by the Red Star Collective. As this process unfolded, Atlantica would make a difficult decision. They realized that this current course would simply lead to a slow but steady capitulation. If they were going to lose, they were going to take down as many Reds as they could. And so, the decision to go to war was made. But of course, this decision was not taken lightly. The Galactic Republic had intercepted a Confederate ship underway to Terra, and decided to make it a matter of principle to interfere. Of course, it was an unimportant conflict, and little could be spared, but a contingent of clone troopers with a Jedi commander were dispatched to the planet. It couldn't compare to what the Reds had in quantity, but it afforded Atlantica a way to fight back. So, the Third Terra Civil War broke out, easily becoming the most destructive war ever waged on the planet. But, of course, to the rest of the galaxy, it was nothing. Not even a blip in the news. Just a vanity project between the two sides of the Galactic Civil War. During all of this, the people of Terra-Humanium were kept in the dark on purpose. They had no idea of the politics and the coexistence of galactic civilizations. As far as the population of the Red Star Collective were concerned, glorious scientists had simply made great breakthroughs in creating these weapons. In Atlantica, the existence of those weapons was quite simply denied as Red propaganda. Despite the animosity between the powers, they agreed in a secret meeting to only gradually introduce the concept of galactic civilization to the population. Over 20 years, gradual hints, propaganda, and media would normalize the idea of life beyond Earth, and by the time it was revealed, most of the population barely batted an eye, though many of their primitive religions would unravel in the decades following the revelation. But back to the conflict. As expected, the Red Star Collective dominated the conflict. Despite their biggest ally, Zhonghua, refusing to participate in the fighting, they soon captured the main energy hub of the planet, greatly disrupting Atlantica's productive capabilities. A great push west also threatened to push Atlantica from Romania, though the frontline was stabilized by the use of nuclear weapons. Soon, both sides began to use this destructive power on the other, with the Reds using it in a terror capacity on western Romania, while they themselves were mostly hit in logistical hubs, devastating their naval capacity and pushing power. In the final year of the Galactic Civil War, the tides began to turn. The Separatists had come into trouble on the galactic scale, and there was no more time for Dooku's pet projects like Terra-Humanium. In turn, the Republic had just made a new division of clones available for combat. Soon, a contingent would land in the eastern regions of the Red Star Collective, destroying their presence there. Simultaneous invasions in the energy-producing regions of the planet left entire contingents of droids forever stranded in the deserts of the planet. Under significant pressure from the Separatists, the Red Star Collective stepped up their horror in the final years of the war. Every major Atlantica city within range would get nuked. After this was achieved, the Separatists would assassinate everyone within the Red collective government that might have had knowledge of their existence, before departing the planet. What remained of the Red Star Collective soon unconditionally surrendered to the Galactic Republic and Atlantica. Under the guise of the United Nations, the Galactic Republic would take direct control over the Red Star's former territory and allies. The initial plan was for this territory to be handed over to Atlantica, which could then set out to create a true world government, allowing Terra-Humanium to apply to join the Galactic Senate. This deal, however, would suddenly be altered after the Jedi cowardly betrayed Chancellor Palpatine and the resulting Order 66 and declaration of the Galactic Empire. On Terra, evidence was found of Atlantica being in league with the Jedi Order, and the previous agreements were scrapped. Unburdened by the traditions of the Republic, Palpatine could experiment with indirect rule in this faraway planet. The various territories under provisional Republican rule would be reorganized into the sole Governorate. The Empire settled for Moscow as the capital, since it was a central city with pre-existing connections, plus they already had control over it. While a plan was made to switch the planet's language to Galactic Common, Roeshan, the language of the Red Star Collective, was promoted as the temporary lingua franca for Imperial business. The next decades would see the Empire solidify its control over Terra-Humanium. As far as planets go, it was far from valuable, and little was invested in it. On Romania, the most destroyed continent, the Empire started their planned modernizations, as rudimentary spaceship factories and ports were set up, mostly to facilitate the Tabana extraction on Jupiter and extract the other minor resources of the star system. Most of the states on Terra remained officially independent, for the very simple reason that it wasn't worth the effort for the Empire to deal with the guerrilla warfare that conquest would entail. After all, the states could barely be called free. The Governorate of Sol demanded heavy resource extraction rights on all nations, while territories Atlantica still held as colonies were taken over by the Governorate, as well as other resource-rich areas. Terra-Humanium and everything on it was declared Empire property, and while the people on it were, depending on where they lived, relatively free politically, economically they were very much under the thumb of the Governorate. And even within these independent states, the Empire would mold them into their image. The democracy of Atlantica was not dismantled, it was discredited. Imperial chosen candidates were favored, the autocratic, militaristic kinds. The last, truly independent president of Atlantica would be assassinated by a Red Star loyalist, though many adhere to the conspiracy that it would have had to have been an Imperial trooper, as only they are so precise. Succeeding him would be President MacArthur, the first president to publicly announce the existence of the Galactic Empire. He would also start pushing Empire propaganda onto Atlantica, mainly the concept of humanitarian unity. Many strides were made in racial equality, as in galactic terms, the differences between humans were astronomically small. Yet, as a side effect of this, to this very day, Terra finds itself incapable of accepting the equality of other alien races, as xenophobia became entrenched on the planet. With the influx of new technology, Terra had a huge technological revolution, as automation destroyed the working class of the planet. A sober way of living was imposed, where loyalty to the Empire and the human race was important above everything else. Terra was made to believe that they were crucial as a resource hub for the Empire, while in practice, they were a complete afterthought, a star system to exploit and let drift. There was no future for the little planet. It was already far behind the galaxy, and the war had done little to improve matters. The Imperials caused an extreme brain drain, as all the best and brightest abandoned the planet to serve in the Imperial administration elsewhere. After 20 years of Imperial rule, those left on Terra were either too poor to emigrate or too unimportant to be forced to. The elites were parasites, serving the Empire merely to advance their own interests. One thing that the Empire staunchly cracked down upon was the religion of Buddhism, as it was seen as too close to Jedi ideology, yet another strange link between the galaxy and Terra that science cannot explain. Terra, as a whole, was blind to the existence of the Force. After all, their only contact with it had been a single Jedi, whose existence was kept secret by the government, and records of him then destroyed by the Empire. Any Force sensitives on Terra were simply taken away by the Inquisition, and that would be the end of it. The Empire, however, had made one crucial mistake. choosing Moscow as the capital and Roeshan as their language. Had the government set up a capital on Atlantica soil, or even in Romania, and had they used English as the transition language, the empire might have found itself an extremely loyal planet. Yet, even decades after the Galactic Civil War was over, Atlantica and Zhonghua found themselves unable to accept the humiliation of having to communicate in Roeshan and pay tribute to Moscow. It simply was too much to take, and discontent, while hidden, would rise. Terra would get their chance with the start of the Galactic Civil War. Terra-Humanium would immediately see their garrisons reduced, as the Empire focused on more important planets. As a result, an uneasy alliance of Atlantica, Zhonghua, and various regions in Romania jointly launched a rebellion against the Empire, destroying the sole governorate and laying Moscow to ruin. Immediately, a new power struggle began on the planet, as any spacecraft, weapon, or modern factory became an objective for the new nations to hold. While the factories in Romania were able to create a limited amount of spacecraft, the process was slow and resources were scarce, making each hyperspace-ready spaceship an absolutely irreplaceable commodity. Due to this, Terra would not make a larger contribution in the Galactic Civil War than the liberation of their own star system. By the time a new republic was established, the galaxy had once again forgot about Terra, but Terra hadn't forgotten about the galaxy. Three powers vied for control over Terra-Humanium. Atlantica is the most powerful of them, having reasserted control over much of the Romanian factories. Zhonghua is next up, which, through their strict communal state, could afford to ignore their population's welfare, readily adopting the industrial advancements brought by the Empire. Third was a new state, known as the Roeshan Empire, created by opportunistic Imperial forces which negotiated an early surrender to coalition forces. From the ruins of Moscow, they attempted to merge nostalgia for the Galactic Empire with nostalgia for Roeshan dominance over Terra. Now, while the Roeshan Empire was arguably the weakest of the three powers, across practically all nations on Terra, a subversive class of Imperial loyalists remain. As they see Roesha as the closest to a successor to the Empire on Terra, they do their best to weaken the other nations and bring a Roeshan victory closer. Especially in the few remaining independent states, autocracies previously installed by the Empire simply continued their loyalty to Moscow. Three general areas of conflict now exist between the nations of Terra. First, Romania. Controlling their factories and spaceports meant dominating the solar system. Roeshan and Atlantica thus hotly contest this region. Second is what has become known as the Resource Belt, designated by the Empire as valuable extraction grounds. Thirdly, Jupiter. Control over that planet and its Debana supply is crucial for Terra, both to create and power their limited energy weapons, but also because it is amongst the only abundant resource Terra can sell to the wider galaxy. Short term, the Roeshans have an edge there, having inherited most of the Imperial Navy, but if Atlantica's hold on Romania continues, this Roeshan dominance could swiftly end. For the people of Earth though, this conflict didn't matter. For them, all they realized is that, after the fall of the Empire, things have only gotten worse and worse. A general depression hangs over much of the population, as an economic depression, unlike anything ever seen before, followed Terra's distancing from the galactic economy. As it was soon discovered, the Empire had strip-mined much of the planet's resources, and Terra would soon be forced to start looking beyond their own planet and solar system for survival. As decades passed, the nations of Terra began to look like bad parodies of the Empire, as they were unable to recreate the quality of Imperial gear, but they were still obsessed with replicating it. Scavenged, real Imperial and even Clone Wars gear was carefully preserved by the governments, mostly to be used in parades and other shows of force. But once again, the divisions of Terra seemed to attract interest from across the galaxy, A new, breakaway Imperial faction, known as the First Order, has set their sights on Terra and entered communications with the Roeshan. It seemed like Terra was set for a repeat of the past century.